What's up guys, Asian here again with another build video, and today this is going to be a tanking video specific to the build that you're going to be using in Cloudrest as the main tank. Now when we define the main tank in that Cloudrest, this means that you will be tanking, typically speaking, Zamaja the whole time against a Zamaja fight, and then during the 3 side bosses, assuming that you're doing the 3 side bosses separately, you could be taking either the Griffin or the Rider. The main tank and off tank can kind of decide which one they want to pick. This particular setup, if you want to maintain it throughout the entire trial, is probably going to be best suited for the Rider instead of the Griffin. But again, it's kind of up to you, and the off tank's kind of how you want to split that responsibility. So this particular setup is kind of optimized around basically you're assuming that you're going to be taking Zamaja the whole time, that you're not doing any sort of weird strategies that involve swapping between Zamaja and the off tanks. And it's also going to be a Dragonite build. So eventually I will release a kind of a Warden tank build, but generally speaking for Cloudrest, you're going to want to be either a Dragonite or a Warden, just because of the amount of damage that you're taking from Zamaja as the main tank, the burst heals from the Dragonite, and arguably the Warden are going to be generally a little bit stronger and more useful as a main tank compared to some other potential classes. So just like our other build videos, we'll be going over our gear, our skills, our attributes, our CP points, everything that you need to know in order to make this build work. Then I'll kind of explain, because tanks don't have a rotation, because this is a little bit of a specialized tanking build, instead I'll be kind of be going over, as we go through each of the different steps, you know, the gear, the skills, I'll be going over why we're using this specific gear, what you can kind of replace, and kind of what we're trying to accomplish with this particular build. So without further ado, let's go ahead and get started. First off with our gear. So for our monster helm sets, so this particular build is kind of centered around a progression style guild. So you're not necessarily going to be like Mechanically Challenged or Hodor, you know, going for the hard mode clears right away. This is going to be kind of focused in on a guild that's just starting to learn how to do, you know, Cloudrest +1s, +2s, maybe even hard mode. So this isn't really going to be optimized around, you know, getting a lot of Warhorns out. It's not going to be optimized around getting as much penetration as you can. This is more optimized around making sure that you have the survivability in order to stay alive, because if you go down as the main tank, everything can go south pretty quickly. So for monster helms, you have really 2 options here. The first option is the one that I'm wearing here, and that's going to be Malubeth the Scourger. So Malubeth comes from Wayward Sewers 2. It's a very little used set, so you don't really see this used all too often. However, in the Zamaja fight, particularly during Execute, you will find that the 2 pieces can be very strong and very useful. So the Harvester, the 1 piece, it adds max health, so it's always nice to have some additional max health, especially when you're progressing, so that way you're able to basically take more hits. And then the 2 piece, when you take damage, you have a 6% chance to create a beam that steals X amount of health over 4 seconds from the attacker. While the beam holds, you gain major vitality, increasing your healing received by 30%. The beam breaks if the enemy moves further than 8 meters away. This effect can occur once every 6 seconds. So Scourger, the Harvest Malubeth here, while that heal is nice, and you will see it proc fairly often, it's a lot like Bloodspawn because you're taking so much damage as the tank, because Zamaja does apply several dots to you. You will see this proc more often than not. So the heal is nice, but the main thing that we're going to be using Malubeth for is for that major vitality. Now, as we go further on in the video, I'll show you the potion that I suggest that you use, which also gives major vitality, but you won't be able to maintain 100% uptime just using that potion. So you will need to use some other source in order to get that major vitality back. And for those of you guys who don't know, Baneful Mark is applied to you during Execute. Baneful Mark basically brings your health all the way down to 10%. And it remains on you. You get about an 80% healing debuff, 75-80% healing debuff, up until you are healed all the way up to full. So you want to make sure you have minor vitality, major vitality. You want to make sure your healers have minor and major mending if possible, in order to get yourself all the way back up to full health. There's a lot of different strategies that you can use to get rid of Baneful Mark. One of them is basically stacking all the possible healing buffs that you can. So that includes vitality and mending and everything like that. So that's really the main reason we're using Malubeth there, for that major vitality during the Execute phase. The downside is if you move further than 8 meters away, then the beam does break and you do lose the major vitality, but using Malubeth will give you higher uptime on that major vitality, which will definitely help out your survivability. Now, the other set that you might want to consider using is going to be Earthgore. Earthgore comes from Bloodroot Forge, so you will need to have access to the Horns of the Reach DLC in order to get Earthgore. Earthgore, the one piece, adds 2% healing done. So 2% healing done means any healing that you do output. So that also includes Vigor and Green Dragon Blood. So self heals also count as healing done. The 2-piece, when you heal a friendly target that is under 50% health, you conjure a pool of quenching blood underneath them, which soaks up one enemy placed effect instantly. It heals all friendly targets in the area for X amount of health over 6 seconds. This effect can occur once every 35 seconds. So obviously, as you can tell from the effect, Earthgore is not necessarily going to be about having major vitality or things like that. It's all about that burst heal. And a friendly target does also include you, so if you do pop Green Dragon Blood when you're under 50% health and Earthgore is off cooldown, then you will proc Earthgore and you will get that instant heal. Now this is really, really nice to have. The downside of using Earthgore is that cooldown time. It's 35-second cooldown time, which is fairly long. In Cloudrest, if your main tank is a Maja, you're taking damage fairly constantly. So Earthgore, when it does proc, is going to be very strong and very useful for you as a nice burst heal. But the cooldown is kind of what worries me personally when I use Earthgore as a main tank. That being said, Earthgore is going to be probably one of the strongest options that you can potentially use if you want just pure healing, raw healing potential. And now, the final set that you are going to want to consider is going to be Lord Wardens. This basically is your tried and true tanking set, so it just adds spell and physical resistance as the 1-piece, and the 2-piece when you take damage. You have a 50% chance to summon a Shadow Orb for 10 seconds that increases the physical and spell resistance of you and your allies within 8 meters by X amount. This effect can occur once every 10 seconds, so Lord Warden is basically here for the additional resistances. So it'll help you get up to the resistance cap, it'll make you a little bit more survivable. So that's really where you would use Lord Wardens. If you don't have Earthgore, you don't have Malubeth yet, you can just stick with Lord Wardens. You can probably even stick with Bloodspawn if you'd like to. I just don't particularly think Bloodspawn is going to be quite as strong in a progression group, mainly because the 1-piece isn't really going to be used too much because stamina regen is 0 when you're blocking, and then a 2-piece, well, it's nice to get some more Warhorns. In a progression style guild, it's more about surviving, and Bloodspawn doesn't really add too much when it comes to survivability, just because even though you do get a nice burst of physical and spell resistance, when you don't have that Bloodspawn proc, you lose out on that 6.5k resistance versus using something like Lord Wardens, where you'll pretty much always have the spell resistance up. So I prefer Lord Wardens over Bloodspawn for progression purposes. Now, as a main tank, you will always be the one up at all times, so that's why we're going to be going with Ebon. None of the op tanks are going to be wearing Ebon because they're typically going to be the ones that are going to be going into the Shadow Realm. Whether you're doing the two tank strategy or the 3-tank strategy, you will be going into the Shadow Realm that way. So you will have to wear Ebon regardless if you're doing 2 or 3 tank strategy. So if you're doing a 2 tank, the off tank will also be wearing Ebon, just because you guys will be swapping on and off. So this is mainly centered around 3 tank strategy, so that way you're always up, that way you always have Ebon out. And then for our second 5-piece, there are several options here, and I'm just going to present 2 of the ones that I think are going to be the most useful. So the first one's going to be Dragonguard, Dragonguard, which reduces the cost of your ultimates by 15%. So one of the strategies that we use during Execute in order to get rid of Baneful Mark is to use the Psijic ultimate Undo. So when you get hit by Baneful Mark, you hit Undo, and hopefully you're already at full health 4 seconds before you hit Undo. And so that way it just immediately removes Baneful Mark. Now the downside of relying on this strategy is that when Baneful Mark is applied to you, the cost of your ultimate is doubled. So having Dragonguard basically reduces the cost of your ultimate, so that way during Execute you will be able to get Undo up a little bit faster that way, so that way you're able to pop it a little bit more often. Now, Dragon is not the only set that you could potentially use. There are several other sets that you could potentially take advantage of. So let me see if I can find it. Do not think. Okay, so the first one is going to be Plague Doctor. Plague Doctor is a very selfish set, but in progression guilds you do want to be a little bit more selfish. So this is basically going to be stacking health. So that's basically a super health tank. Is kind of pairing Plague Doctor with Ebon. So that's one potential option there. Another option that you might want to consider, and this is going to be a little bit harder to get everything that you need, is going to be Sanctuary. Sanctuary is a light armor set that is dropped from, I believe it's dropped from, where is it dropped from? I want to say it is dropped from, what's it called? Elden Hollow? No, not Elden Hollow. Actually, no. Yeah, I think it's dropped from Elden Hollow. I could be wrong about that. Let me think here. Sanctuary is dropped from... This is dropped from the same dungeon that Bloodspawn is dropped from. And I'm blanking on the name. You should just check real quick. The dungeon finder. Spindle Clutch? Yeah, so it's dropped from Spindle Clutch. That's where you will get Sanctuary, I believe. But Sanctuary is a light armor set that's dropped, so it is a potential option here, mainly for the increased healing that you receive. As the 5-piece, you can see here, increases healing received by 12%. So it's not quite as strong as Major Vitality, but it does stack with Major Vitality. So that's one strength of Sanctuary. Now, one thing you do need to watch out for if you are going to be using Sanctuary is the fact that the 4-piece gives you max Magicka. So you will need to make sure that your stamina is higher than your Magicka. If you decide to go with Sanctuary, you might need to put a little bit more points into stamina in terms of attributes in order to offset that additional Magicka that you're gaining if you decide to go with Sanctuary. Sanctuary, again, is kind of an option that not a lot of people consider, but in terms of main tank and Zamaja, it is a potentially good set to run. Now, one final set that I do want to mention here is going to be Eternal Yokeda. This is from any of the 3 Craglorn trials. It is a heavy armor set. So Eternal Yokeda is nice to have because of that 2 additional healing taken, which is really nice to have. It gives you max health, gives you minor aegis, so you take less damage. And then the 5-piece, when you die, instead of dying, you turn into a statue for 3 seconds and you generate 200 ultimate. And then while you're a statue, you can still be healed. So basically, this is kind of a get out of jail free card. It's procs every 10 minutes. So if you're taking 10 minutes between pulls, then you'll be able to get Eternal Yokeda proc once every maybe 2 or 3 pulls, depending on how long your pulls take. And it will potentially help you out when you are in a sticky situation. I personally use Eternal Yokeda when I tank Cloudrest, either main or off tank, and it has saved the run several times. Eternal Yokeda has procced when I normally would have died, and that just helps save the run, because then I don't have to necessarily worry about somebody having to kill my shade and then going to resurrect me. It just keeps a tank up, and you can still get healed while you're a statue, and you gain additional ultimate. So if you happen to get the Eternal Yokeda proc, you can still get all the way back up to full health. I believe it automatically removes Baneful Mark. I'm not 100% certain on that, but even if it doesn't, you generate enough ultimate in order to use an ultimate to gain back some resources back, even though you just died. So those are kind of the options there for skills, or not skills, gear. Now, in terms of enchants and traits, I go with this typical infused on my large pieces, sturdy on my small pieces. However, as the main tank, you'll be running around quite a lot because Zamaja does move around in the arena and she teleports around. So instead of sturdy, you might want to consider doing something like well fitted, which reduces the cost of sprint, so you're not losing as much stamina when you run from teleport to teleport. Because this particular build, we don't use a charge ability, so we are relying on basically keeping an eye on where she's going to end up and then running over. So well-fitted is a potential option here. Blocking, you're not really going to be doing actually all that much blocking. It's not going to be something like the warrior where you're blocking all the time and he has a lot of hits coming in. So reducing the cost of block isn't as important as necessarily dropping your sprint cost. So you can even split it up. You can go like 2 small sturdy, 2 small well fitted. So you can play around with the enchants however you'd like. You can even go with all well fitted if you're comfortable, particularly if you are also taking the griffins, because you do want to dodge roll some of their attacks to avoid the bleed. So that is an option. You might want to consider adding some well fitted here instead of sturdy or infused. It's kind of up to you. And then I do have health enchants on my small pieces. I do have a stamina enchant to help offset, make sure my stamina is always higher. Then I do have prismatics on my large pieces here. Now for our jewelry. For the enchants, I'll start with enchants. I have 2 shield play and 1 reduced stamina cost, so that just helps out our stamina sustain when we're reducing cost of blocking and reducing the cost of our stamina abilities. It's always good to have. Then you notice the traits are very different compared to your standard tanking setup. So we have 1 swift. Again, because we're moving from whenever Zamaja is porting around, we want to have a little bit faster movement speed so that way we're able to get to that spot and turn her around so she's not doing her Mind Blast ability on the group. And then we also have 2 harmony traits here. And this is mainly for the heal that you get from orbs as well as from Blood Altar. Typically speaking, you will have Blood Altar running, particularly on a progression group. Probably overflowing altar, and so harmony really helps out during execute. You hit that blood altar synergy and you heal by a huge amount, much greater than you would without the 2 harmony traits. So I highly recommend at least having 1 harmony trait on here, and at least 1 swift trait as well. So if you could go something like 1 swift, 1 harmony, and then the last trait can be either of them, I highly recommend going at least 2 harmony and then 1 swift, but you can go with something like triune or healthy or even robust, depending on what you particularly need. For our enchants on our weapons, we're going with infused with a crusher enchant on our front bar. This is a typical sword and board. So again, Prismatic on our shield, and then I have sturdy, but you can go well fitted or infused. And then on our back bar, we're going with an ice staff infused with a weakening enchant. I'm not 100% certain what is affected by weakening. I do know weakening does affect the Mind Blast, which is the light attack and the heavy attack from Zamaja. I'm not sure if it affects crushing darkness or the orbs that spawn, but it's nice to have that weakening enchant there anyways, just in case it does affect the damage that you do take from those 2 moves. So that's pretty much it for gear. Let's go over to our character sheet. Again, I'm a dark elf because I just like my dark elves, but you can go with any of the typical tanking races, so Argonians, Imperials, even Red Guards are fine. In terms of attributes, this is going to vary depending on whether your specific race. So I have 50 health, 10 stamina, 4 magicka, but depending on, again, your specific race, your specific gear setup, specific enchants, things like that, you might want to play around a little bit. Generally speaking, though, you do want to put as many points into health as you can, and you just want to make sure your max stamina is higher than your max magicka, regardless of which setup that you're using. So basically what I like to do is I basically put at start off with 50 points into health, and then I take a look where my health is sitting at. I like to sit at around like 37, 38k. Depending on how comfortable you are with the mechanics in Cloudrest, you might want to go a little bit higher, maybe up to 40k. So I kind of have this like health threshold that I hit, and then from there I say, okay, let's put the rest of the points into stam and make sure my stamina is higher than my magicka here. For our Munda Stone, we're going with the Atronak for magicka regen. That's pretty much par for the course for pretty much any tanking build. And then we're going with purple food, so increases health, magicka, and stamina. So that's pretty much par for the course there. I'm a vampire. That's pretty standard here. And now let's move on to our skills. So on our front bar here, I have Pierce Armor, which is our taunt, Heroic Slash, Fragmented Shield for the major mending. I prefer to go with Fragmented for Cloudrest. Just for the major mending, again, because that Baneful Mark does require you to get all the way up to full health in order to remove the debuff. So having that major mending, you use Fragmented Shield, you use Green Dragonguard or Vigor, it really helps out the amount of healing that you do. So that's really helpful there. I have Balance, but you can replace this with the Sigic Order ability, Deep Thoughts if you'd like, or Introspection, whichever one you prefer. I like to have Balance because that does basically give me my major resistance buff, so that basically helps free up a slot for me to use. But you can go with Deep Thoughts if you would like. I personally have found that Balance is a little bit better because you do need to drop block in order to use Deep Thoughts or Introspection, and it does force you to be still. And I find that the Zamaja fight, as a main tank at least, you have to be a little bit mobile because you're always going to be targeted by Crushing Darkness, so you always have to kite around, you have to move around a lot, and just if you're not blocking that heavy attack, then you will get killed. So I prefer to go with Balance rather than Deep Thoughts here. Then Absorb Magic. So this is here mainly for 2 reasons. So first of all, it's just for the additional damage mitigation that you get while blocking. That's always nice to have. It's going to be small. You're not really going to be seeing that big of a reduction from using Absorb Magic, but every little bit helps, especially in a progression team. But the real reason we're using Absorb Magic is because it actually does eat the heavy attack from Zamaja. So if Zamaja is doing a heavy attack, if you block it, you'll take a certain amount of damage. But if you decide to use Absorb Magic instead, it'll actually eat part of that damage. And basically, the way it works is it takes the full damage that you would normally take if you didn't block the heavy attack hit. It subtracts out the damage here that you get from Absorb Magic, so in this case 18,775, and then it calculates your block reduction from the remainder. So let's say it's supposed to deal, let's say 60,000, and your Absorb Magic it gives you a 20,000 shield. Then it'll, instead of calculating your block damage from the 60k, it'll actually calculate it from the 40k instead. Plus, it'll also heal you for 15% of your max health. So that's just on top of the already how much reduction you get from using Absorb Magic. So I like to have Absorb Magic there for the heavy attack, just for the additional. So again, a little bit more cushion room. You're still going to take damage from the heavy attack, but it won't be quite as much. And it also will help proc Earthgore as well. So that heal does proc Earthgore. So that's a nice additional way to proc Earthgore. And then for ultimate, we're going with Temporal Guard because we get that minor protection. Again, because of the way damage mitigation stacks, it's not as big, it's not as much as you would think, but every little bit counts for progression teams. Plus, we do need to use Undo. That is one strategy to remove the Baneful Mark debuff during Execute. Like again, you get Baneful Mark applied to you, you hit Undo, hopefully you're at 100% health 4 seconds before. So that way you just completely remove Baneful Mark entirely. So you can continue to tank Zamaja during Execute. Now for a back bar, I have Inner Rage, which is a range taunt. I like to use this over the heavy attack for the Ice Staff, but you can go with the heavy attack with the Ice Staff instead if you would like. Green Dragon Blood for our minor vitality, as well as a nice burst heal. Echoing Vigor for additional source of heal, which helps proc Earthgore and helps heal us still. Unrelenting Grip. There's nothing you can pull to you in the trial itself. You can't pull anything except maybe the Yagra that spawn, except for obviously the Yagra monstrosity. Unrelenting Grip is really here for the major expedition that it gives you. So when you're targeted by Crushing Darkness, or when you have to run over to Zamaja because you teleport to the other side of the arena, you can use Unrelenting Grip. You gain that major expedition, you move a little bit faster, so you're not going to get caught in that Crushing Darkness. You can basically turn Zamaja around faster, so that's why we have Unrelenting Grip there. It's a little bit of an odd ability here, you would think, but the major expedition does really come in handy during those situations. And then this is really a flex spot here, this last spot here. So I have Crushing Shock here because sometimes, again, Zamaja will port all the way across the arena and then she does her interruptible. You want to have that range interrupt just in case. And if you do eventually start to do +1s and +2s, you will potentially have to interrupt Gallonway when he does his channeled ability there. So that's why we have Crushing Shock here. But this is a flex spot. So two moves that I have seen used on some main tanks are going to be Cauterize. I have Flames of Oblivion here, so that's why I don't have it on there. And then Cinder Storm. You basically put Cinder Storm where you would be basically tanking Zamaja, and that'll give you additional heal over time that help proc Earthgore. And so that's really nice to have there as well. So small heals, but every little bit helps, especially in a progression style guild, especially when you're wearing Earthgore. That'll help proc Earthgore and get you that nice burst heal going on. So for example, the main tank in Mayflower actually does use Cinder Storm and Cauterize when he main tanks Zamaja. So for the additional heal there. It helps proc Earthgore, it just helps him, give him a little bit more survivability there. And obviously for our ultimate we have aggressive Warhorn. So as a main tank you will be able to use Warhorn pretty much throughout the entire fight up until Execute. At that point you're going to be swapping over to Undo. So you're going to be one of basically one of the primary Warhorn users. The healers might not necessarily be able to use Warhorn depending on the strategy that you use. For example, in Mayflower, sometimes we have our healers use the Templar healing ultimate after the monstrosity spawns, and especially during Execute. You might be one of the only Warhorn blowers there, so it's nice to have that there, and you will be the primary one at least up until Execute starts. Now for our CPs are pretty much identical to tanking, the typical tanking CPs. So we have 75 into Arcanus, 56 into Nasty, 56 into Shadow Ward, I have 40 into Tumbling, and then I have 23 into Warlord. Now I do want to point out a couple of potential options here when it comes to moving points around. Because you'll be sprinting a lot, you might want to put points into Sprinter here to reduce the cost of your sprint. And then you make sure to have at the very least 120 points into the lever here, so you can drop this down to like 64. You just want to have 120 points in order to get wind running, which increases your movement speed by 2%. It's very small, but overall it is going to be helpful for you to have that because you'll be running around a lot during the field. So you can drop, for example, Arcanist down to 64, and then put 11 into Sprinter here to hit that jump point there. Now for our blue CPs, I personally have it. I need to actually redistribute these. So this is it for mag DK DPS setup. But as a tank, obviously you're going to basically want to put as many points as you can into Blessed. So you can go 75 for 14, or you can go all the way up to 100. I personally would recommend going 100 if every little bit counts during progression runs. And then Elfborn, you can go basically go up to 81, which is the 24% jump point, or again you can go all the way up to 100 if you would like. So I'm going to stick with 81, and then you can put the remaining points wherever you'd really like. Where I would personally put them is I would probably put them into something like Precise Strikes. So I do something like Precise Strikes here, just so that way we have the Perfect Strike passive here, which increases our weapon crit by 12%, so that way we have a little bit extra chance to get some critical heals off of Vigor. So that's what I would personally do there. Now for our red CPs here, so you actually are not going to be taking a lot of melee damage here. So you're not going to be taking a lot of physical, poison, or disease damage. Pretty much all the damage you're taking is going to be either Oblivion or it's going to be magic damage. So we can actually take all of our points out of Hardy. Again, it all depends on what you're specifically tanking. If you're tanking the Griffin, you will still want to have points into the Hardy. But if you're tanking the Riders, for the most part, you don't need that many points into Hardy. So I would probably drop this down to about 43, so you have 10% still, especially if you're still doing the mini bosses. Then you could have 64 or 75 into Elemental Defender. Thick Skinned, you do want some points into Thick Skinned here because there are going to be some pretty heavy dots that are applied to you. And then 60, you can go up to 66 with Ironclad this way. And then that leaves 4 points remaining, and then you can kind of put that into Quick Recovery here in order to gain some additional healing received. So the general idea is you can invest fewer points into Hardy, put more emphasis onto Elemental Defender, and you also still want to put some points into Ironclad and Thick Skinned here. Ironclad's going to be more important. The direct damage is going to be what's going to kill you, but you do want several points into Thick Skinned. I have 51 here, just because the dot that Zamaja puts on you, it does hit fairly hard, and there are a couple of dots throughout the trial that do end up doing a fair amount of damage to you, particularly if you're tanking the Griffin. The Griffin dot can get pretty bad if you get a lot of stacks on top of you. Then Quick Recovery here for the healing received. You don't want any points into. You could put them into Bastion if you'd like, but I think the healing received is going to be more important overall. So that's pretty much it for the build itself. One last thing that I do want to mention here are the potions that we're using. So we're not going to be using tripods, so we're not going to be using the standard health, magicka, stamina. We're going to be using Essence of Lingering Health instead. So this basically restores about 1k health per second for 48.6 seconds, but we're mainly here using it for the Major Vitality buff. So Major Vitality, you can see here, increases our healing taken by 30% for about 15-16 seconds. So that's going to be really, really strong to have, particularly during Execute when we need that additional healing to get rid of Baneful Mark. This is what I recommend you run. You can go with tripods still. It's kind of up to you how you want to do it. You can, for example, go with tripods up until Execute, and then when you go to Execute, you can swap to Lingering Health, because you do have time while the animation's going to swap your potions. One potion that you might want to consider using is also going to be this new potion, Essence of Speed. So let's go over to the potion table so I can show you guys how to make these potions. So the Essence of Lingering Health here is going to be Scrib Jelly, Beetle, whatever this is, Beetle Scuttle, and Butterfly Wings. So this will give you your Major Vitality and your health. Now, in order to make the speed potions, you will need to use the new potion, Mother of Pearl, and then you're going to need to use Scrib Jelly and Butterfly Wings. You basically replace Beetle Scuttle with Mother of Pearl, and you get the Essence of Speed, which gives you your Major Expedition, your lingering health, and your major vitality. These are very expensive to make though, because mother of pearl is a very expensive ingredient. So I personally would just recommend sticking with tripods up until execute, and then swap to your essence of lingering health during execute. So that way you're able to get that major vitality when you need it the most, as well as that additional heal over time from the lingering health itself. So that is it for this build video. If you guys have any questions at all, please feel free to leave them down in the comments below. Anything about the tanking mechanics for Cloudrest, or any questions you might have with the build itself. So if you guys, I will be eventually making a video kind of looking over the main tank and off-tank roles for Cloudrest in a 3-tank setup. As far as I know, a lot of guilds are still sticking with 3-tank setup. You can do it with 2 tanks, but it is very, very risky. If 1 tank dies during a 2-tank setup, then it's pretty much going to be a group wipe. So a lot of guilds are still sticking with 3 tanks. Even Mechanically Challenged, last I heard, is still sticking with 3 tanks for their runs. So again, all this build is specific to main tanking Zamaja in Cloudrest on using 3 tanks instead of 2 tanks. So again, if you have any questions, feel free to leave them down in the comments below. Hope you guys found this video informative, and I'll see you guys in the next dungeon.